Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Tower. In this episode, I wanted to showcase how my tournament runs typically go. And I think that it's going to be a very interesting episode because it allows me, with this particular set of battle conditions that we have, it allows me to test two different module setups, one with Galaxy Compressor and one with project funding. So in the previous couple of rotations, we ended up having the ultimate weapon duration cooldown battle condition, and that has made it impossible for me to use project funding. Now in today's set of battle conditions, notice that there is tank ultimate and basic ultimate. Basically what that means is that there will be a lot more tank enemies, and coupled with this more enemies battle condition, I'm going to get a lot of tanks. Now the tank ultimate battle condition is extremely difficult for me because my damage is not very developed at the moment. I'm still making a transition to the glass cannon build, but it allows for a very interesting trade-off. So on the one hand, I don't really want to have Galaxy Compressor because of this tank ultimate. I need to kill the tanks as quickly as possible, otherwise they would pile up around my tower range, and that makes project funding quite desirable as a module to use. However, because there is also more enemies being spawned and there is armored battle condition, what might happen is that Galaxy Compressor, which allows me to use my black hole with a lot more uptime, might do a much better job than the project funding, simply because it's going to control most of the basic enemies. In particular, I don't want to deal with range enemies, especially with the armored battle condition. It's going to take me a while to kill range enemies, and because it takes me a while to kill these range enemies, there's always a chance that when black hole ends, the enemies are within my range line, and then that is going to enable them to shoot me and I die. So Galaxy Compressor might be the better alternative, but we shall see. I've done two sets of runs, one with Galaxy Compressor, so I'll show you my tournament setup. In my tournament setup, I typically go with my death penalty, and instead of Multiverse Nexus, I go with my Dimension Core. As you can tell, I don't really roll my modules, that it's not optimal, this set of sub-module effects, but it does the job. This is my Galaxy Compressor. You have all seen it before. It doesn't really have any impact. This is my project funding. Primarily, I just use it for the cash bonus. And this is the Anti-Cube Portal which I'm using. Obviously, I would like to get Ancestral on this Shockwave frequency to do more damage, but as you can tell, I'm very starved on reroll dice at the moment. So these are the two sets that I'll be using. In one set, I'll be using project funding. The main benefit of project funding to me at this stage is that I would kill tank enemies a lot quicker because I would have a lot higher damage. But I lose out on some crowd control because I'm not going to have a permanent uptime on my black hole. The second set I'm going to use is going to be Galaxy Compressor. Galaxy Compressor is going to offer me a lot more crowd control because I'm going to have a very high uptime on my black hole. I'm not sure if it's going to be permanent, but if it's not, it's going to be very close to permanent. And right, so we shall see whether or not crowd control wins or damage wins in this episode. Now before we begin, the next thing I wanted to showcase is my range setup. So I received a comment from Almightysage, and I'll put the comment up. The comment basically says why I don't run with minimum range, and the main idea is that I want my orbs to be at a specific distance from my tower. So currently I set it at 10, and as you will see later on in the run, that allows, at this particular range, it's allowing me to energy net the bosses just as they come into my tower's range, which allows for the orbs to hit the bosses Now there is this penalty to op damage in tournaments, but every bit of damage counts. So this is the current setup that I do. And more generally, regarding Almightysage question, in my farming runs, I also use my orbs to kill the enemies, simply because enemy health is pretty high where I'm farming currently. And if I were to run a minimum range, what that means is that I'm no longer able to use my orbs, and there are quite a lot of orbs. So if we have a look at what I currently have, I've got 6 orbs over here. Okay, so 4 is the basic ones. I have got 2 extra orbs from my sub-module effect. And with the in-game extra 2 orbs, that gives me 8, plus my extra orbs, that gives me 10 or 11, I can't remember now. And so the idea is that I want to deal as much damage to the bosses as possible, because each orb that it hits the boss is going to take off a percentage of damage on the boss's health. Now if I were to run a 30-meter range, the bosses will not be locked down at the orb range, and basically what that means is that I have to deal a lot more damage, and because the boss is so nearby to my tower, I have to deal all of that damage very quickly on the boss. So instead of doing that, I just run with a max range. I just max out my range. It's currently sitting at 83 meters, and that seems to work fine for me. Now obviously it might not work the same for you, and the main reason for that is because I have this ultimate weapon plus called Chrono Loop. So if we just go into like a random run, you can see how Chrono Loop works. Basically, when my chrono field turns on, as we will see shortly, that when my chrono field turns on, any enemy that comes in, say at this point over here, is going to be pulled by the chrono loop and move in towards my black hole. So I don't really get penalized as much as compared to someone, say, using just the standard chrono field with not enough black hole coverage. Now the second thing is that in my current setup with my dimension core, I have this plus 12 meter black hole size, and as you can see, it's giving me very good coverage. So in the event that I'm using Galaxy Compressor and I get permanent uptime on my black hole, I actually have a lot of crowd control on my enemies. One final thing before we start. So this is my tournament setup. So I'll just quickly go through the cards that I'm using. You will notice that I did not put in my wave accelerator as well as enemy balance, and that's specifically because of this battle condition that we have. It's the one with more enemies. Coupled with armored battle condition, it's actually very dangerous to have the extra enemies being spawned. Even though, let's say, if we are using project funding, it's going to provide us with more cash, the armored battle conditions requires a lot more hits to take in order for the enemies to die. Now, as you can see, I've already completed the runs. So when I showcase the tournament runs, I'm going to be speeding up through portions where I'm not talking, just to give you guys an idea of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm doing the tournament. Okay, so let's get into the first run. So this is the time left to join, in case anyone wants to pick a lucky number to join in future. I'm not sure what this bracket is going to be. I've typically not had the luxury of having spare time in the afternoon on the weekday tournament to experiment, but since I'm having a bit of spare time today, this is the time that I'm going to be joining it. So okay, let's go into it. And typically for my tournament runs, I just make sure all my ultimate weapons are on, and it's very straightforward. I'm just going to spend the first few waves just upgrading my enemy health level skips. As you can see, my pretty good black hole coverage. It's covering almost my entire tower. This is the run with Galaxy Compressor. And so I'm just going to be running with the Wave Accelerator Mastery. Sorry, the Intro Sprint Mastery. And so at some point I'm not going to be able to kill the enemies, and when I'm unable to kill the enemies, then my energy shield charges will be taken up, and eventually I will pop my demon mode. I don't think I will want to end my intro sprint early to use nuke. It's a lazy person's mentality, but I don't think that there would be much difference anyway. I mean, I say that now, but you know, potentially I get to till tomorrow and then I realize that the person in front of me is just a couple of waves ahead, and then I would regret not using my nuke. But you know, whatever. So in terms of the target priority, typically in tournaments what I'll do is I'll put the range enemies first, because they can shoot from outside, and in this case, because there is tank ultimate, then I guess we would put tank under boss, and at some point I will put closest. That is just in case a fast enemy comes too close to my tower, I will start killing them. So this would be my target priority in both this run and the next. So tournaments used to take a very long time for me, but I'm really glad that I invested in this intro sprint mastery, because now my tournaments, they are very fast, as we will see. As you might be able to tell, my poison swamp range is actually pretty bad, so I want to, after I'm done with my masteries, get some levels into my poison swamp radius as well as the stun factor, and then try to get my poison swamp to a point where it's got permanent uptime, and so that acts as an additional layer of, I guess, security in the form of crowd control by stuns. At some point I would want to invest in damage, obviously, because poison swamp damage is actually pretty good now. I'm not sure if I actually need to slow down the game speed because of the large amount of black hole coverage that I'm having under this build. So the idea is that if you were to slow down your game speed, then you get a few extra waves, but because my black hole coverage is almost the entire range of my tower, as long as it doesn't drop, I should be pretty safe for it. And you know, reducing the game speed does make the run a lot slower. So we shall see how it goes. Maybe when I start getting chip damage, I'll get scared and I will start reducing it. But at least for now, I want to get this out of the way as soon as possible. So as I can tell from here, the control that I'm having over the enemies is pretty good with this large black hole. As of now, I haven't taken any chip damage yet. We shall see how long that lasts. I presume that with this Galaxy compressor build, what's going to happen is at some point, and that point would come pretty soon, we would start seeing that I'm unable to kill the tank enemies when they are on their ultimates. And as a result of that, I'm going to get overwhelmed by the enemies at some point. Thankfully, I haven't procced any berserker yet, so damage should increase. As far as I can tell, black hole has not dropped so far, so I'm hoping that it's really permanent uptime. It would be quite scary if at some point I don't get any package for a few waves and then suddenly black hole drops, and what you might see happen would be I lose the wall, I lose my charges of energy shield immediately, and probably I would pop wings all at the same time. So you can check the breakdown of the boss damage. So as you can tell, orbs are still doing a decent amount. Chain Lightning seems to be doing pretty well, even though mine's very unupgraded. And my Poison Swarm range is just under the range of my tower at the moment. I would like to get it to, you know, the radius of my Poison Swarm to be at level 20 or something. That's definitely one of the things that I would upgrade once I'm done with my Mastery Labs. Oh, and speaking of labs, something very nice happened to me today. So if you have a look at my labs, they are all at ×5 speed. This is the first time it ever happened. It's not going to be on a regular basis. I think I would probably achieve all labs at ×5 speed once I have gotten Enemy Balance Mastery maxed. It's currently at level 7 for me. And now at wave 750, you can see that the tank enemies are sort of piling up. It would probably get to a point where, you know, I guess when we get to above or close to wave 1000, most of the enemies clumping around my tower would just be the tanks. At some point, I would like to get the lab that reduces the tank enemy health, because that is also going to benefit tier 17 and tier 18 progression runs at some point. And with my Dimension Core, having the substat that reduces the speed of enemies in Chronofield, so you can see that the boss is actually traveling very nicely. It's getting hooked by the energy net at my op line. But this kind of thing sometimes happens as well. As you can tell, the enemies clump up and then that sort of forms a ramp that pushes the boss down past the op line. And this is not just for tournaments, it happens when I'm farming as well. So even though Chronofield is a good crowd control, it's not a perfect crowd control, right? Even though Black Hole is a good crowd control, it's not going to be a perfect type of crowd control. We definitely need to layer in the inner landmine stance as well as the Poison Swarm stance in order to get as much control over the boss as possible. So far at wave 900, haven't taken any damage yet. That's very nice. I'm hoping that, you know, I didn't speak too soon. Oh, there we go. So now I've taken damage. As you can tell, my damage is now procced Berserker to the max. And this is the main reason why you can't really go EHP after tier 11. As you can tell, enemy health is like enemy damage 43Q. There's no way you can survive that. So it's much better to just focus on dealing damage to the boss past tier 11. So the idea for this would be at some point when my energy shield charges get popped, eventually I would pop wings, and after wings, just before I die, Demon would activate because of the Harmony Tree perk that I selected, and that should boost my damage slightly further, so hopefully I can get a few more waves in before I eventually die. As you can tell now, it's getting quite hard to kill the tank enemies. There's a whole lot of them. The nice thing about this particular build is because Galaxy Compressor offers so much uptime on my Black Hole, it's allowing me to survive quite a lot because the range enemies just simply don't shoot at me. And this comes from the lab that disables range enemies when they are in the Black Hole. So when I'm switching to the project funding, I'm not sure whether or not it would actually be better for me, because even though I'm dealing more damage, as you can tell, the enemies, when they get sucked into the Black Hole, it's within your range line. And what that means is if I were to lose my Black Hole when I'm when the range enemies are inside my range line, when the black hole goes away, they will all shoot at me and potentially I'm going to die. And so it could actually result in lower waves as compared to the galaxy compressor case, even though I'm dealing more damage. Now this would probably be different if there was no armored battle condition, right? Because then it would be really easy to kill the range enemies. And so I guess that's what makes this particular tournament interesting to test out. One very nice thing that I just observed is because there's so many tanks clumped around my tower, it's getting quite hard for bosses to hit me, right? I say that and then I just got 3 hits, but it takes a while for the bosses to actually come into my range line. So as you can tell, wings have now popped, which means the next hit that I take is going to proc my demon mode, and hopefully that's going to allow me to kill enemies quite quickly. There we go, demon mode has procced. So I have a few seconds of immunity. Hopefully now with 4.05 trillion, I can actually clear out some of the enemies quickly. Maybe in terms of the target priority, I'm going to put range down for now. Just because I don't really, I would rather focus on clearing the bosses and tanks, since Black Hole is doing such a good job of controlling the ranged enemies anyway. As you can tell, even though I'm shooting like all the smart missiles on the tank enemies, they're just not dying. I don't know how much health they actually have. It's quite scary. Okay, and that was it. So currently at rank 2, we can have a look at the stats. So Black Hole damage, you can tell, did a lot, right? It was just controlling the enemies, and we do 2% of their max health every tick. So Swamp damage was also pretty decent, right? You get to end damage and my Swamp is not upgraded in terms of damage. The Chain Lightning obviously did very high, and as you can tell, like I say this all the time, that my Chain Lightning is more upgraded in terms of damage multiplier than Smart Missiles, but because the enemies were also clumped up, you can see that my Smart Missile damage ends up being much higher than Chain Lightning, and that comes from the Smart Missile amp. Okay, so what is, oh, the first guy is at 1320, but I thought I was at 1300 something. I'm not sure why it registered as 1140. Did it change? Oh, right. Okay, so I am at rank 1, but this is transitory. I don't believe that I will end it off at rank 1. If I do, then this is a lucky time, guys. So okay, that was the Galaxy Compressor run. Now let's switch to the project funding. Now you might think that with project funding, because we get more cash by having enemy balance and wave accelerator mastery, I should put in those 2 cuts, but because it is an armored battle condition, I need a lot more bullets to destroy the enemy's armor. So just because I have more damage, it's not necessarily going to translate into me having killing the enemies a lot quicker. So what I guess we can do now is, right, everything stays the same. I start another battle, watch the thing to get the extra ticket. Oh, right, okay, so that's why I'm at rank 2, right? This guy is at 1760, and if we look at him, it's like tier 18 4000. There's no way I'm competing with that. So Almightysage, I think you commented on some of the videos before. Well, good luck to your tournament. I think we're in the same bracket. So in the case where I'm using project funding, what I really want to do now is to make range targets a priority. That way I can kill the range enemies quickly, so that if my black hole falls off, I don't die instantly. I'm still going to put in some levels into my enemy health level skip at the start. Just because the way project funding works is the number of digits in your cache that is going to translate into how many times multiplier of damage you're going to get. As you can tell, I'm getting like 5 point something million cache a minute. So when we go from million to billion, then of course you gain more damage, but the increment is going to be a lot slower because it takes a lot more time to generate the required cache. So it still doesn't matter to me that I'm investing this like small amounts of cash on my upgrades at this early on in the round. So as you can tell, I no longer have permanent black hole. And in terms of the strategy, it's exactly the same as before. I'm just probably going to wait all the way until my energy shield charges are popped, and then demon mode activates automatically. If I had to guess, I think I'm going to be in a worse off position with project funding. But as with most things in life, I'm always wrong. So we shall see. Definitely in terms of the damage with project funding, it's going to be a lot higher. I'm currently sitting at 390 million. So this damage is without Berserker proccing. So if you recall from the earlier run, I think I was at 700-ish billion after Berserker procced. So I think with project funding, it's going to give me something like 30 to 40 trillion damage at the end. I'm not sure. Alright, so now we're at 1 billion damage, and as you can tell, in order for me to get to the next multiplier on my project funding, it's going to be 10 billion. So I have to get 9 billion more cash. So the benefits of project funding, they are very steep early on, but it gets increasingly harder to get higher multipliers on your damage. Oh, there we go. My wall has actually been procced. It's only wave 600. I presume when I get higher chain lightning chance as well as a larger poison swamp, it's probably going to help with armored battle conditions quite significantly, because I've got additional sources of damage, and potentially that might make the project funding a bit more reliable. So the idea is that the way I'm thinking about it is, and it doesn't matter if I'm doing so much more damage if the enemy has armor, right? I'm basically dealing 0 damage to them until I clear the armor stacks. I think at some point when I get the nuke mastery and the range mastery, the slow mastery, that is going to reduce the attack speed of enemies by 100%. So enemies will attack a lot slower, and potentially that would make these range enemies a bit less annoying. For me, I think in tournaments they are the main source of annoyance for me at the current stage of progression that I'm in. I'm not sure if you guys saw it, but there was a range enemy that flew straight to my tower line earlier, somewhere over here, and then somehow it disappeared. I'm not sure what happened there. It's probably due to the game speed being too high. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lower it down to speed 3. And the idea is that with the enemy speed bonus, it's making the range enemies move too quickly, right? So the game doesn't have time to register. On one frame, the range enemy is probably somewhere out here. Next frame, it's right at your tower range. So if you slow down the game speed, then what I've heard is that it makes the computation a bit better, and so you will see maybe the range enemy move from here to the middle of your tower or something if you halve the speed. Well, I've still managed to survive to wave 1000, and the main difference that I'm noting at this stage is that I have a lot easier time dealing with the tank enemies. Obviously, at some point, they are still going to overwhelm me, but you know, this is giving me a bit of hope that potentially I can survive longer than in the Galaxy compressor case. Oh well, I say that and then I just popped wings, so obviously not, right? I can't believe that it always happens right after I say something. But since wings are popped, we'll see how much damage I get after demon mode pops. And I didn't know what happened to my energy shield charges. I can only presume that my black hole went down and there were range enemies in my tower range line, which led to them attacking me and me dying. Oh, as you can see, demon mode has popped. I'm at 45 trillion damage, so hopefully that allows me to kill all of these enemies a lot quicker. Hopefully that allows me to survive a few more rounds than in the Galaxy compressor case, but I'm very doubtful of it, just because I will get overwhelmed by the ranged enemies very quickly. So looking at this really makes me want to upgrade my black hole, get it to like max duration, so that I can have as high of an uptime as possible. Because I think the black hole disable range enemies lab is extremely powerful, not just in tournaments but also in farming. Oh, there we go, I'm dead. So, okay, I got killed by fast this instance. In terms of the stats, you can see the main difference in damage now, right? Because I am no longer having the enemies gathered so much as with the Galaxy compressor case. My smart missile damage is a lot lower, right? Because I don't have the consecutive amping on big groups of enemies. Chain lightning damage is also lower. Swarm damage is also lower. I believe these were all at N damage before. But black hole definitely does a very good job of controlling the enemies. So even though project funding gave me so much more damage, more damage is not necessarily the best thing that can happen. So hopefully this gives you guys an idea of how to go about using your project funding if you have one. Okay, and so that was it. That was just a tournament run. That's how I typically do my tournaments. I don't bother slowing down and it's like getting rid of the intro sprint mastery and all of that fancy stuff. I just want to get my tournaments out of the way as quickly as possible, just so that I can go back to farming. Okay, so that was a typical tournament run for me. Hopefully you guys found the content interesting. I'm not sure if there's actually a demand for looking at my tournament runs, but in future, if there are interesting battle conditions that allow me to test various setups, I wouldn't mind doing more such stuff if there is a demand for it. So please let me know in the comments if you think that would be helpful for just getting to understand how the gameplay would look like at different stages in the game. Otherwise, have a great one ahead guys, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye!